All right. Welcome to Astro presents Outrage Astrology. I'm Mike, and this is the wonderful Brittany Robinson. She usually actually introduces herself, but I'm going to go ahead and bestow upon her the nickname the Scorpio Moon Queen, as so generously given to her by one of our viewers. How are you doing today, Brittany?
I'm good. That was so sweet when she said that. Made my day. And then I made a point to you. I was like, see, secure hot girls like me. That was like the first thing I said.
Yeah.
So whoever you are, you're beautiful, and I love you too.
She actually is very pretty, but that's a whole other thing. It actually, it's really interesting the way that Brittany reacted to that compliment, because today we'll be talking about narcissists.
That was a great segue. Thank you. That was great.
We will be discussing personality disorders, but specifically we'll be honing in on NPD, the narcissistic personality disorder, as well as just traits that fall on the narcissism spectrum. So I know Brittany had a couple things to say about this before we even begin to get into this very interesting astrological topic.
Yeah. So the first thing that we have to say is we are not psychiatrists. We are not diagnosing people. So don't like freak out. Like, you know, we're not going to be the sacrificial lamb on anyone's altar of self-righteousness. So just don't write us and say like, you can't diagnose mental disorders off of an astrological chart. We know that.
Not. And that's also the thing about personality disorders, is they usually manifest in a variety of different ways, and the predispositions to narcissism can be seen in somebody's chart. That isn't necessarily they're going to be a narcissist. From my personal perspective and from my personal observations, granted I'm not, a doctor, but I have noticed that narcissism is a trait that is developed over time as a result to stimulus in your environment, coupled with predispositions that already exist within the natal chart. So, I mean, anybody can be raised in a certain way in a loving, nurturing environment and not be a narcissist, but some people are just born evil.
And you have actually, one of the charts we're going to be going over today is your personal, very up close look at a narcissist and what it's like being the victim of one. That'll be your perspective.
I have a childhood history of being the victim of a narcissist, and we will be examining that today. Now, granted, through understanding a lot more about what narcissism entails, I do understand that it's not necessarily the narcissist's fault for being the way they are, and it's also difficult for them to change. So just my personal opinion in regards to dealing with a narcissist is anybody can overcome narcissistic tendencies, and self-awareness goes a long way, but once you get past a certain point and you fall directly into the NPD category, it's difficult for you to really understand the error of your ways, and the level of manipulation that particular disorder implies means that it's better off for you as the potential victim of narcissism to just remove yourself from the situation.
Right, yeah, exactly. Because no, when you are full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, you cannot convince that person that they are a narcissist or that their behavior is damaging, because to do that, it would just shatter their whole ego, their whole identity. It would be detrimental. So they just won't, they're not going to do it. So that's why you're saying it's best to just not engage.
And many times, even if they say that they can overcome it and they say, oh yes, I have these qualities, it's just part
of a manipulation tactic.
Yes. They end up so well in therapy until they get out of therapy.
Right. So the characteristics or the traits that you see with NPD are an inflated sense of self, the delusions of grandeur, which is, you were asking me about this earlier today. What this is about is believing that you are going to accomplish something nobody else could, nobody else has. You are the best of the best, and everybody should just bow down and listen. There's entitlement. There's a lack of empathy, and kind of falling under those are the people that will twist everything back onto themselves. There's no back and forth exchange in a conversation. It's just always turned back to them. and bullying. So they're going to be like putting other people down, being condescending. There's gaslighting is something that a lot of narcissists will do. So those are the traits that we're going to be focusing in on in these charts that we're going to look at today.
Yes. What I've noticed is many times and actually we'll go over it when we look over the second chart, but narcissism is at its core a severe issue with self-esteem. And I think that there are different types of narcissists in the terms of like some people are just set up to be predisposed for it. And then certain people are actually highly empathic, and through a history of abuse, they learned to take on those traits at a very young age. And it's very much a part of their early conditioning.
Yeah.
So, that being said, what chart did you choose as one that you would like to present as a phenomenal case study for the narcissist personality type?
So I chose the chart of Ted Bundy, and I'm going to set up my screen share here so that everybody can look at this chart with me.
Before you do that, though, what makes Ted Bundy different than somebody with psychopathy or the sociopath? What makes him different?
Well, first of all, you can have more than one personality disorder. There's no rule that you can only be a narcissist and nothing else. So, I mean, I do believe that he was a psychopath. I don't think most people would argue with that. But, you know, in his chart, as far as his case, if you've watched anything about him, I mean, he felt that he could represent himself as his own attorney in cases. He was convinced that he was going to people were going to see that he was innocent. Even though he knew he did this stuff, he could just do no wrong. So he felt like he had that illusion of grandeur, you know, better than everybody else. This entitlement. I mean, he escaped from custody twice, I believe. My Ted Bundy history is a little shoddy, so you guys are free to correct me if you want to. But
mine is as well, but I do know some of the basics of his personality.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have a lack of empathy to rape and murder over 30 people. So that's pretty blatant. Bullying, I don't think I have to explain. I mean, he really fits all of those character traits. So I pulled up, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Yeah, so we got this chart ready, and I just wanted to chime in real fast. Just intuitively, the first things I noticed about this chart, one, it was put in whole sign.
Yeah, and I wanted to explain why I did that, but we can flip back to Placidus and look at it there too, because I think it is pertinent.
It is, and I was about to explain why. Placidus and whole sign, I prefer to use both because I think that both interpretations can ring true for the same chart reading. And if you'll notice, Saturn and Pluto are in the first house in whole sign, but if you switch it over to Placidus, then you would put Saturn and Pluto in the 12th house.
Yeah,
now that is important to me. That is important to me because when you look at yes, okay, good, you've got it shifted. Switch. You can switch it quickly. So Saturn and Pluto in the second house can, if
12th house.
In the 12th house, sorry.
Yeah.
If other aspects concur, can show some, major issues in relation to your mental health, especially Saturn in the 12th house. Maintaining your mental stability is something that you have to consistently work on and challenge. And somebody with that placement can, like I said, if other placements concur, slip off the deep end relatively quickly.
Well, and something we were talking about earlier too is that he's got several planets retrograding. He's got Saturn, Pluto, Mercury, and Venus all in retrograde and Uranus, which, as you like to say, just fucks people up.
Not well.
That was your words.
I disagree with that. Sometimes these very bombastic statements that a lot of people are like, "Oh no, I'm not like that." Well, no.
Bombastic. Listen to your words today. That was a good one.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, the 12th house is associated with institutions. So institutionalization, i.e., being incarcerated and having these pretty malefic, ugly planets in the 12th house makes some sense for him.
Yes. Also think it's interesting, this isn't really related to him being a psychopath or a narcissist, but the North Node in the 10th house, one thing I've noticed with the North Node being in the upper half of the chart, the South Node being in the lower half, those persons usually, if they do come to prominence, they spend the first part of their life in obscurity, and then over time, they gradually push themselves out into the wider world. So they start up in the audience, and then eventually they end up on stage. Not saying that if your North Node is in a, Southern Hemisphere house, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end up famous one day. But you usually start off as the follower and end up as the leader, or end up under the spotlight in some capacity, whether it be within your community or the world at large. So that would very much fit his personality, or fit what happened to him. Another thing I notice is Mars conjunct the moon in a fire sign and in the 4th or 5th house.
I'm going to flip back to whole signs for this.
They have a tendency to have the Mars moon conjunction. I mean, there's another chart that we're going to show that has that same conjunction, and it's in a fire sign as well. And the propensity to bully people and to push people around to get your way, to try to, your emotions become so much a part of the ego drive that it can lead you to do some pretty screwed up things to people if you don't recognize and try to curtail your own impulses and your own reactions. That's just one thing. So.
Well, and on top of that, you have them making more so the moon, but it's going to affect both because of that conjunction. You have them in opposition to Uranus, yes, which really makes the emotional volatility kick up to 400 degrees.
Yes.
It's just going to be all over the place.
1 minute you're fine, 1 minute you're going crazy, 1 minute you're fine. And there are plenty of people that have this aspect that live normal lives, but they do have to deal with a certain degree of emotional changeability and in some cases instability throughout their life.
So I wanted to point out, as far as narcissism goes, that there is, now, again, none of these traits in and of itself, not even in combination, is going to make somebody a narcissist. But we are looking at a chart of somebody that we know is a narcissist and what astrologically makes that up. And so a rising Leo, his ascendant is at 25 Leo, that gives you a lot of presence. Okay, so another rising Leo is Donald Trump, which we probably think is a narcissist too. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with rising Leos. In fact, I love rising Leos, but that does give you kind of this larger than life presence. And narcissists have to have an amount of charm or flamboyance in order to pull their victims in. So that does aid it. Then you see that his ascendant ruler, the sun, is in the 5th house, along with the sun and the moon as well. So the 5th house being about recreation, how we have fun, children, recreation, procreation, it's sex. Okay, so the 5th house has a lot to do with sex, and his crimes were of a sexual nature. So you can see, how there's going to be a life focus on 5th house matters.
Yes. Another cool thing I noticed is, so Ted Bundy was considered to be very charming, rather charismatic. He was actually more of a private loner type of personality, which by having all of his personal planets in the southern hemisphere, is that the northern hemisphere? It's in the southern half, correct?
Yeah.
And the bottom half is the northern hemisphere, yes. So the fact that all of his planets are centered in the lower half of the chart does lend itself to a rather introverted nature. But he was considered to be very, very charming, and that Mercury conjunct Venus in Scorpio is very charming.
Don't get it wrong though. He was an extrovert. He was just more of he was a more loner personality, but that doesn't mean he wasn't extroverted.
Yeah. Well, okay, I do understand that. He actually did. He was involved in he was an aspiring lawyer for quite a while, I believe.
He was in school for it, yeah.
Yes. But no, his ability to charm with Venus being conjunct Mercury was very much there. Also, the intensity implied by having Venus in Scorpio is undeniable with his personality, the level of potential obsession. He was dumped, actually, by a woman when he was very, very young, and it completely broke his heart. And then he actually almost got her back later on in life. But then he, what happened when he got back with her, Brittany?
I don't remember. Probably. Oh, I think she was one of the. He got really like violent with her, I think, or very like intimidating. He kind of was off-putting, and it freaked her out. But I don't remember all of the nitty-gritty.
No, what I remember actually happening was the woman that initially broke his heart. She left. She decided to be with somebody else. Well, eventually
Okay.
his life turned around, and he started doing really well. Started making a lot of money. He was aspiring to be a lawyer. He was doing something, and he actually got her back. And his new lifestyle, his new way of living, actually convinced her to really fall in love with him. And once he had decided that, or once that she had decided he was in love with him, he turned the tables on her and basically toyed with her relentlessly as a way of getting revenge on her psychologically for rejecting him.
Hmm. Did not know this.
That's something that I would do. I wouldn't hurt her. But I would definitely fish him back in and then basically toy with her.
You've said as much. You have like several people on your list of, look at me now. Okay, so.
Yeah.
You brought up Venus in Scorpio. I wanted to point out, too, that Venus is making a 0 degree in conjunction with Uranus.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
I don't know. Why don't you talk about that, Brittany?
Why? That's such a really significant aspect in his chart.
I know, but you seem to know a lot about it.
You want me to talk about it?
Yeah, you talk about it.
Okay. Okay. This is really volatile. His way of expressing this obsessive nature of Venus in Scorpio
he switches obsessions quickly.
Yeah, and it's just not knowing how to outlet that feeling, that desire. So it led to, I think, a lot of frustration. And then you notice that he, like you said, he switches it quickly because he would go through victims so fast.
Yes.
In fact, we think when he was finally talking to somebody at the very end of his life before they executed him, he told them a ton more women that he had killed and where they were located, and they found a lot of their remains. That they had never even caught on to. It was just astounding. But then the reason I really liked Whole Signs 2 for him is then it puts Pluto and Saturn in his first house, which I think for his narcissism fits beautifully. You've got the loner personality there with Saturn, the kind of commitment to getting things done. Saturn and the first people are usually, they're pretty serious about whatever their goals are. They take themselves very seriously.
Yes.
And then having Pluto there, that just gives people some magnetism, some power, some sway over others.
Yes. But then he was also a bully and a complete nightmare, and his sense of himself was just absolutely through the roof crazy. What about Chiron and Scorpio in the 4th? What do you think about that?
Well, it being in the 4th, his home life was really weird. He was, at first, because he was an illegitimate birth, he was raised for the first, I think, 4 years of his life as his mother was raised as his sister and his grandparents as his parents. And then all of a sudden his mother gets married to his stepfather, where the name Bundy comes from. And then he realizes that his sister's actually his mother. Yes. So you've got a lot of personal pain there. He had a lot of like pseudo siblings that were younger. I think step siblings or half siblings, I don't remember which, that were younger than him, that he felt like got more attention than he did. So you just see a lot of pain in the 4th house.
A lot of secrets in the home.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got so many, we've got 4 in this chart. If it switches to Placidus, I think there's even more, but you do see a lot going on with this 4th house stellium.
Another thing is that Neptune in the 3rd house. That's great for lying. Very, very good liar. Very loquacious. That's a good lawyer placement. He would have probably made a great lawyer.
I think he probably would have if he wasn't, but then he got so full of himself that it was just, that was part of the thing. If you watched him in the courtroom, you could tell he thought he was crushing it. And you're just going, what the fuck? Like, you are bizarre. But he's got Mercury making a semi-square to Neptune also. And isn't it the semi-square that you kind of feel like these are the aspects that are problems, but they're not like the squares and the oppositions where you're going to see
have
it?
To call attention to it. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people with really, really insane psychological issues. They will have a ton of inconjunctions. They'll have sesquiquadrats. Those sesquiquadrats aren't so bad. They'll have a lot of semi-squares and semi-sextiles.
So we're going to look at the fact that, and it's not a wide one, but we're dealing with a luminary, so we're still going to talk about it. But you see that the sun is trining Saturn. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have to have some self-esteem issues when Saturn is touching the ego like that.
Yeah, to be completely honest, I notice very readily whenever somebody has a lot of flowing aspects from one of the masculine planets. You can turn off the chart now. I noticed that people tend to have a lot of narcissistic tendencies whenever you see Mars or the sun making easy aspects to Saturn, and sometimes the hard aspects in the case of Mars, not necessarily the sun. So I'm just going to go over some other aspects outside of the charts that we're going to be focusing on, that I've noticed in the charts of narcissists. You're usually looking for somebody that has the sun in a sign that does well in, primarily exalted. They're very highly represented with Aries. There's a lot of Aries narcissists. You see it a lot with Leos, you see it a lot with Capricorns, you see it a lot with Cancers. Sagittarius would definitely fall into that spectrum. If the sun is just overall very, very well aspected, or if you see easy aspects from Saturn to the sun or Saturn to Mars, and then even the hard aspects to Mars, that can show somebody that's actually quite ruthless and seeks to humiliate other people. I do not like seeing that aspect whatsoever in somebody's chart. But it's, at least, especially in a man's chart. In a woman's chart, it can show a lot of a victim being the victim of narcissistic abuse or being the victim of abuse, unfortunately. Seeing the sun in the first house or the 10th house can also give somebody a little bit of that selfishness, that me first, I'm the boss, I'm the leader type of vibe. And if you see that in conjunction with other aspects, that can be a big red flag. But you're looking for a combination of aspects, not just one of the aspects that I listed is going to show narcissism. And then on another note, narcissism itself is a spectrum. Me and Brittany were talking about this earlier. We both have narcissistic traits. I think most people do, unless you're like to the extreme end of the other spectrum and you are an empath. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to have, to some degree, something, unless their self-esteem is just shot. What we're looking for really is the ability to self-reflect and examine or not.
Yes. So people that have a lot of easy aspects to Saturn, most people will be like, oh, well, you have just a wonderful sense of responsibility and this and that. And it can manifest that way. But it also, Saturn is not, it's a malefic. That's just it, and that's the end of it. And I've said this before, having an easy aspect to Saturn does not change what Saturn is. Just like with Pluto, having an easy aspect to Pluto does not change what Pluto is. Do you know how many people I see that have easy aspects from the Moon or Venus to Pluto, like the trine, that have terrible issues with obsession? They just view it as normal. They see nothing wrong with it. And that's the issue with, having a lot of easy aspects being made to Saturn, especially to a masculine planet. So, with that being said, we're about to look at another chart here in a few moments. And this one's interesting because, as I was discussing earlier, many narcissists can in fact be people that have a very empathic nature. But unfortunately, because they are so sensitive to their environment, early conditioning could rapidly turn that sensitive nature into very much a narcissistic personality because they learned very early on how to survive using those tactics and that mindset.
Before you flip over to this chart, I want to take a minute and talk about, because you brought up Neptune was in Ted Bundy's third house and how that's great for lying. I think that would be the case if it were aspected to Mercury as well. But what do you see as far as Neptune's role in the narcissist chart otherwise?
Ego delusion. Let's talk about Kanye West here for a moment. Kanye West has a very tight opposition from Neptune to the Sun, but he's also got the Sun conjunct Jupiter as well. So that's a big ego, Jupiter, boom. And then Neptune being in hard aspect to the Sun, many times it can create a victim mentality where you're seeing yourself that's far worse. But Neptune is all about delusions, and you can also have the opposite end of the spectrum and have delusions of grandeur and have delusions of being actually, your sense of self can be so far removed from the reality of the situation that narcissism is not that far off the table in terms of the possibilities with that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, just in and of itself, having a Sun opposition to Neptune, which if you are a Cancer born in 86, for example, I know you're going to have that aspect.
Shots fired. We're not even talking about that.
But it a lot of times creates a martyr complex. It's this, everything is awful for me, I'm the victim. And so if you're going to have that combined with other traits, you're always on the defensive, and narcissism is a defensive manifestation.
Yes.
Okay, pull the chart up.
Okay, so we will be going over a very, very difficult chart. Hopefully when I pull up Google, it won't show to porn. Okay. Subject narcissist. Let me add a couple other things, because there are some things here that are quite interesting.
How does one have 19,302 unread emails? How does that even happen?
I'm popular. Now check out this chart. Okay, so this is a difficult chart. Can you see it?
Yeah.
So we could switch over to, the thing is the chart's relatively evenly distributed. So if we switch over to whole sign, it's not going to really be much different. The only difference is these two planets, Saturn and Mercury, will then be deposited over to the seventh house. And then Uranus will be firmly in the second house, which is meh for this chart. So what are the first things you notice about this chart?
The moon conjunct the ascendant is a big one. The moon conjunct Mars as well. We've got
ascendant in Leo.
Ascendant.
Moon conjunct Mars in a fire sign, just like Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Saturn conjunct the descendant. Not only that, but opposite the moon. We've got a lot to go over on this one.
Well, yeah, this is a big one. Okay, so I know this individual very well. I'm not going to throw any names out, but if you'll notice, we've got the Sun receiving, with the exception of this one in conjunction and this one semi-square, it's receiving relatively positive aspects.
Kind of in conjunction to Mars.
That's very defensive. That's a very defensive placement, and that is always striving to prove yourself, even if it's not a nice aspect. Always feeling like somebody's going to take advantage of you, that you need to be the tough guy in every situation, that you need to ward off anybody. It's like having the Sun square Mars, where you have a lot of drive to get stuff done, and you always feel like you're being challenged, but it comes off in an even quirkier, difficult to realize like you don't understand that why you're doing what you're doing. That's the nature of the in conjunction, is just not being able to put two and two together as to why you act that way.
So I want to also point out that wicked looking T-square there with Venus as the focal point.
Yes. So the thing, well, there's two. There's the focal point with Venus, and then there's
yeah, there are two. Sorry, you guys see I'm wearing my bottle cap glasses today because I'm blind as a bat. So, sorry.
So we've got Mars and the Moon conjunct, albeit loosely, but I'd still put it in play just from knowing this individual in the first house. This person is a huge bully. A huge bully. And then we've got the Moon opposite Saturn, and that can show there's depression issues, but for this individual, it just shows a big lack of empathy. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of person that suggested once to me that to solve our immigration problem, we should just put a bunch of machine guns at the border and mow people down as they try to come across. And he was serious. He was absolutely serious. It's just the thing about it is the Neptune. The Neptune part of it always kind of gave me a lot of insight into where this person's coming from. This person actually can be quite empathetic. Or he
is it real empathy though? Because I don't see that.
Well, what would come off as real empathy to you?
Well, I think it's fake empathy, because I don't think that you had mentioned that this person,
he's sensitive. He's very sensitive.
Because he's got his Moon conjunct his ascendant, in the first house. So yeah, he's sensitive. He doesn't want his own ego damaged, but that's not empathy.
True. This person, I just feel, was very, very sensitive as a child, and there were situations that he was put in that made him feel very abandoned and very abused. And I think that very quickly, he was just so sensitive to his environment that the circumstances he was put in when he was a child sort of wrecked his ability to empathize with people on a normal level, and everything became very much a prove myself, I'm the best, I have to be the best, and if I'm not the best, then life isn't worth living. That's just kind of it. Also, there is another thing about this particular individual. You'll notice Chiron is at the cusp of the 7th and 8th house. It'd be the 8th house exactly if you go through whole sign. This individual, information was disclosed to me that this person used to, as a child, sexually abuse other children.
Yeah, see, you said this was an empathetic person. It's not.
Well,
this was never a good person. Sorry, I don't think.
Mars in hard aspect to Neptune. There's some weirdness with the sexuality there. I don't know.
Well,
I'm having
also the ego drive there is damaged too, because your Mars is in retrograde. It's making what is it? Yeah, it's making it. I mean, it's making a square. It's a really wide one. But there's damage to the ego drive also.
Yes. This is an individual that is very hardworking, but is actually very obsessed with money and obsessed with control. You see the Pluto square Venus, it's a super wide orb. Some astrologers wouldn't even count it. But just through watching this individual and how he manages his relationships and manages his money, the concept of control, he has to be in complete control and dominate every single thing that he's involved with, every relationship, every business arrangement. There is no trust. Nothing is put up to. He's basically assumes the worst out of every single human being. He's the only person in the world that's worth trusting. This is a person that once told me that he has never told a lie in his entire life.
So tell me, because I don't want to say too much about the chart because your experience with it is much more vast and wide than mine.
Yes, but there's a thing here is I have a hard time looking at this chart subjectively. You do.
Okay. Well,
objectively. I only look at it from a subjective standpoint.
Yeah. Well, what I really, really am focused on is this T-square between the Moon and Neptune and Saturn.
Yes.
And how it is oriented along the angles.
Yes.
So to me, this screams somebody that feels little empathy and cannot sort out their emotional self. That is, their emotions are very easily damaged, and so they therefore put this boundary up against other people, this is hard having the moon in that placement because the emotions are so readily available. Like they're just there. The temper is like instant.
Very much so. Very dominating. Okay, enough revisiting down memory lane on this one. So what other aspects that we haven't gone over have you noticed before in the charts of individuals with personality disorders?
Well, the sun often squaring the ascendant. The ego can be really in your face, but off-putting to people. The way that Neptune is oriented, whether there's more of a tendency to lie, whereas it being aspected to Mercury, or being able to charm the pants off of people, like being aspected to Venus.
Well, it can work in another way, though, because you have to look at the houses. With that one, you have to be really, really careful because, like, let's say somebody's got Neptune in the 4th and it's trining up to Venus in the 12th. That's actually highly legitimately empathic. Like legitimately sensitive, legitimately empathic. You have to really pay attention to the houses. Like I cannot stress that enough. I'm not necessarily saying that to you, I'm saying that to our viewers.
Yeah.
Like you have to look at everything and you have to put the houses into play. If you attempt to identify narcissism with just an understanding of the signs, you're going to really read somebody wrong, and you can use astrology quite destructively.
Yeah, do not ever say, and I see this all the fucking time on astrology groups, that Leos are narcissistic. They get the worst reputation, and Aries get it too.
Aries are overrepresented. I will say that. Aries suns are overrepresented, but they are by no means.
Yeah, so you can't just go around saying that like somebody is a narcissist because their sun is in a sign. You can't say anything about anybody as a blanket statement because their sun is in a sign.
Any planet being in a sign.
Right. Okay, so the 1st house and the 7th house axis and their rulers are really, really important for narcissism, as well as how the sun is aspected, because the sun in and of itself is the ego.
Yes.
That's if I had to summarize it all, that's what I would say.
And then there's the ego drive with Mars. Those are the two most important planets to look at.
Thank you. Yeah, and Mars.
Now, I will say Leo moons. I noticed a lot of narcissists that have a Leo moon. It's a lot. I have a Leo moon, I know. And I actually do have, and like I said, everybody has narcissistic traits to an extent. And then you start to get into this whole debate into what is the difference between a narcissistic trait and a trait of confidence. There's a fine line between the two, you know. So you have to kind of, there's a lot of gray areas there. And I actually believe I do have narcissistic traits, and I actually try to work through them and recognize them. Same as Brittany here with her vanity.
I love how you just decide stuff and you just verbally vomit it everywhere.
We were talking about it earlier. Anyway. A lot goes on behind the scenes here, guys. I'm just going to let you know right now. So
yeah, I mean, we're back after, how long has it been since we recorded? Like 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks.
That's because
it's 2 weeks and people are already saying, "Where's Brittany? Where's Brittany? Where's Brittany?"
Well, Mike pissed me off, and then I pissed Mike off, and then we tried to make up, and then we pissed each other off again. This is what happens when you have in your composite Mars conjunct Pluto exactly.
No, it's Mars conjunct Venus conjunct Pluto. It's a whole Pluto cluster.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing where we just piss each other off.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean I feel like we pretty well summarized it.
Yeah, and actually we will be covering more characteristics related to personality disorders. And we also have a couple new episodes. Wow, my computer. So yeah, we need to wrap this up really quickly. The power is about to go out.
Ooh, so, I hear it.
So if you would like to contact me or Brittany, we will be posting contact information at the bottom of the page, and we will be coming at you. I'm releasing content at least every couple days, but we will be coming at you with another episode of Outrage Astrology relatively quickly. So until next time, guys, my name's Mike.
And I'm Brittany. Bye.